Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Data Scientist podcast. I'm very happy to have here with us today the Curious Rabbit. So for those of you who are in the tokenomics community, you might recognize the name. The Curious Rabbit is a tokenomics expert who's very active on Telegram, on LinkedIn, and I guess on different mediums. He's done some very interesting work in many different fields. The most recent one, that at least the one that has come to my awareness, is bonding curves, which is one of the things that we're going to talk about today. And yeah, we're very happy to be here with the Curious Rabbit today. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Stelios. It's a pleasure to be here. As you mentioned, I work in the field of token engineering. Really, it's complex systems design for Web3 applications and protocols. Bonding curves, they present a really interesting primitive. So I started a research group along with a few other people called the Bonding Curve Research Group. Initially, it was funded by the TEC, but our goal is really to move forward the discussions about bonding curves, their use cases, applications, and the parameterization, all that kind of stuff, to explore analyzing them and things of that nature.
Yeah, perfect. And yeah, I saw your work in bonding curves, and I thought that's particularly interesting because I was recently working on a project that was that was also involving bonding curves, and it's an interesting mechanism because on one hand it's a bit let's say restrictive. It's not like a completely open market. On the other hand, there are some there are some protocols like automated market makers that wouldn't exist without bonding curves. And yeah, I just want to hear more about what initially got you interested in that area, and yeah, pretty much what you think about the usefulness of these techniques within the Web3 and the token engineering space.
Sure. So what got me interested is as I build these token engineering systems or these token systems, it's like we're pulling together different primitives to create a modular stack of, hey, here are the tools that we're using as infrastructure for our system, right? And bonding curves are one of the ways that we create a market. Really, if I had to refine or synthesize what a bonding curve is it allows projects to create a market for an asset. And that's incredibly powerful because what we're really doing in Web3 is we're creating new market structures for economic activity to happen. And bonding curves are one of the integral ways that we've done that in Web3, whether it's through Balancer, through Uniswap. They're all using AMMs, automatic market makers, which are bonding curves. But then there's also other kinds of bonding curves that projects might use to launch their token, right? There's a bonding curve that you might use that we're calling a SAM, so a secondary automatic market maker, and that's what we see in Uniswap and Balancer. And it's, let's say I'm pooling a certain quantity of my project token with a reserve asset to create a market and allow for trading. But another mechanism that we've explored in our research group is something we're calling a PAM, so primary automatic market maker. And that's something like I'm a new project and I create a bonding curve that allows people to purchase my token in return for a reserve asset. So I'm not actually depositing my project token and a reserve asset inside of a liquidity pool to facilitate trading. I've created a bonding curve that allows my community members to purchase my token, and in return, they deposit the reserve asset. So it's like a way of initiating a market for a token without having to upfront deposit a bunch of liquidity. And it has a bunch of other attributes, the PAM versus the SAM, that we can get into.
Okay, yeah, do you want to elaborate on that? So the way it works is that is this like something used for a token offering, so to just kickstart liquidity, like, so you ask the users to provide another asset and then they get the token, but they can still give back the token to get the original asset, and I guess there's a fee involved in that. So how does it work?
Yeah, exactly. So there are a couple of examples. One of them is the TEC that created something called the augmented bonding curve, which is a bonding curve, but with kind of a certain strategy surrounding it. So what they did is they did an initial raise, and then they used that initial, let's say, public raise to fund the reserve asset on their initial bonding curve. And once that bonding curve was initiated, people in the community could then go and, let's say, deposit DAI and receive their community token in return. And if ever they wanted to exit the ecosystem, they would sell the token and receive DAI in return. And as more people purchase the project token, the price goes up. The thing, and one of the really big differences between, let's say, a PAM and a SAM is, in a PAM, as more users purchase the token, the total supply of the token increases. And what that means is that the market I've created with a PAM, with a primary automatic market maker, is oftentimes less volatile, because for the price to increase, the circulating supply needs to increase. Whereas in a liquidity pool, let's say I deposit 5% of my tokens in a liquidity pool with a reserve asset, that 5% can get traded, and let's say 10% of the liquidity pool gets bought, the price fluctuates a lot more. Compared to, imagine 10% of my total supply needed to be bought, that takes a lot longer. There's going to be a lot more people. It's just the circulating supply needs to increase substantially, whereas the other one, it's working with like an already existing chunk of supply. And it means that the volatility is actually much higher in a liquidity pool and an AMM compared to something like a PAM.
Okay, that's interesting. So what are the ideal what's the ideal use case for a PAM then? Like when would the Web3 project consider that?
I would say it's great for a project that wants to launch a token in an environment with reduced volatility. Now, reduced volatility has a whole bunch of utility, because economic activity is promoted when there is price stability, right? And it's also reducing the amount of people that you're inviting into your ecosystem purely on speculation. So one strategy might be a project that is new launches a PAM to create a market for their token, and it allows for community members to purchase the token at a good price with reduced volatility, blah, blah, blah. In a year or two, let's say the project reaches some level of maturity, and there's some, let me take a step back here, is you can have a PAM and a SAM, right? So a project might start and launch a PAM, and that allows community members to purchase the token. Let's say 6 months down the line, they're like, okay, we want to facilitate trading in secondary markets. So they also launch a SAM, let's say a Uniswap pool. And let's say eventually, once the project has reached a certain level of maturity, enough tokens have been bought, so the circulating supply has increased, they might say, well, let's turn off our bonding curve and just allow trading to happen in the secondary markets, because it's already a mature market.
Okay, so essentially this is, let's say, a soft landing to market maturity or something along those lines, right?
That's a great way of thinking about it. And I would say it's one use case, right? Since we're programming a market with a bonding curve, I can imagine a whole bunch of other use cases. Like I can imagine subscription services being programmed into bonding curves, sort of thing. You had a token that you bought, as long as you own it, you are subscribed and have access to this thing, and you can always liquidate that subscription and get your return back by selling it into the bonding curve, kind of thing.
Okay, that's very interesting. Do you find that like this mechanism is now popular, or yeah, what's the current status like in the community?
So a variety of different bonding curves are popular for a variety of different use cases. The constant product, a bonding curve that we're familiar with from Uniswap, of course, everybody uses it to facilitate liquidity and trading of their token. Honestly, probably Web3, DeFi, all that would not exist if not for that kind of bonding curve. You also have something called the liquidity bootstrapping pool, which is also a bonding curve, which is almost like a public sale mechanism. And it's where you put up some of your token and the price is decreasing over time until it hits a floor. And the more buy pressure that it receives, the higher the floor is when it ends. What was
Mm.
the original question? Sorry.
Oh no, like what's the current status of this type of
Oh
mechanism in
yeah.
the community? Yeah.
So the liquidity bootstrapping pools are becoming quite a popular way to public raise in like an equitable manner because of some of its qualities and attributes that prevents like whales from purchasing and then dumping and all these sorts of things. PAMS, on the other hand, which is like a project launching a token and it receives a reserve asset and this curve is there and it allows them always to exchange for it. It's a lot less popular, but nevertheless, I believe it's like more one of those use cases that is less explored and such a new design space that it just requires more research, more innovation, more development.
I see. Very interesting. And all right. And what other like innovations are you seeing now in the space of tokenomics? I really like the word you use, like primitives, right? Whereas I think this is the key, right? We need to approach this from a perspective of, yeah, these are like different modules and we have to combine them to achieve certain outcomes. So and I think this will also help standardize what is might now be a very fragmented space. So what do you see like in as the future of let's say tokenomics, like the near future, in terms of, I don't know, new techniques, methods, building tools? Yeah, what's your opinion?
So I would say one of the biggest changes that I'm most excited about is emissions, but not just emissions, but like KPI based tools, right? So rather than just having some sort of fixed emission rate or fixed vesting rate or a specific lock period that's fixed, because you're working with all these assumptions about what might be appropriate in the future, it's not dynamic, it's not flexible. So having those kind of mechanisms based on KPIs of the protocol of the application, for me, I see that as being much more resilient, flexible, and useful moving into the future and sustainable.
Very, very interesting.
So like one of the other things I'm really interested in are these DeFi primitives like DeFi NFTs that will allow us to play with our circulating supply in interesting manners, right? There's an application called resonate.finance where effectively, if I have users staking the token and this staking has a promised APY, I would actually be able to say, hey, let me purchase your staked position because it's a DeFi NFT. And in return, I'm going to give you these tokens now, but that amount that I'm giving you now is lower than the amount that you would receive, but the difference is time, right? You're going to receive this amount now, and you're going to give up that extra percentage of tokens that you wouldn't get, but you're going to get liquidity now for your staking position. And in return, me as the project or the core team, the treasury, I would own that position and I would receive those tokens over time, thereby reducing the circulating supply by paying out stakers right now. These are all like tools and mechanisms that I feel like we're going to have as token engineers, but also to help balance and maintain the supply and demand of our token economies.
Yeah. So with regards to staking, like, what's your opinion? Because it's obviously a very important mechanism, but we've seen all kinds of use cases from, staking being part of a consensus protocol, like proof of stake, all the way to pure speculation. You just like stake some tokens and then you get some rewards, and then it all becomes a huge Ponzi scheme. So what's your opinion on the current state of staking? Do you like, what innovations are you seeing in that space other than the one you mentioned?
So I have a friend at Inverter Network that's building some really cool capabilities around staking that'll make it much more flexible or adaptable. I kind of forget some of the characteristics or qualities of that, but I really liked what they're doing, and it falls more in the line of this KPI based emissions. So imagine like, rather than having an APY that's fixed, or imagine you had a fixed APY, but it adapted to the amount of users that was staking, right? Rather than saying, I'm going to put all these tokens and I'm going to reward stakers, whether I have 100 stakers or 1,000 stakers. If I only have 100 stakers, the APY is a lot larger. If I have 1,000 stakers, the APY is like, oh, that's the range I was going for. Imagine I can adjust it so that my APY was always between 10 and 20%, right? So I'm still offering rewards to users for locking their tokens in the short term, but I'm not over rewarding them because the system is a bit more flexible and I can adapt to the amount of tokens being staked and the amount of stakers and stuff like that. In terms of what do I think about staking, originally it was used, as you mentioned, in proof of stake chains to secure the chain, because the amount of value that's being staked is equal to the amount of money that is securing the chain and the amount of money that you would need to purchase the tokens and then, attack the chain, kind of thing. We took that and we started to use it in a whole bunch of different ways, as you mentioned. And I think the problem is we stopped trying to figure out what is the exact value that the project is receiving for these users staking the token, and how much value am I giving them in return. In the nascency, in the early stages of a project, when the token has less utility, when the application has less demand, when the protocol is being used less, it can be very useful to have users lock their tokens so that there's less circulating supply, so that there's less volatility in the price action and stuff, and in return you reward them with some sort of yield. Ideally, over time, is you don't keep rewarding users for staking their tokens with your tokens. You offer them alternative incentives in the terms of utility. Like, so one project we designed is, as users stake their token, they're going to receive this point system, and this point system can then be used within the application itself to, be part of competitions, to purchase things in the store, to work with partners, to blah, blah, blah. So we're not rewarding users with tokens that will further increase inflation. We're rewarding them with something else that they'll find valuable. And so ideally, we make that sort of shift over time.
Okay, this makes sense. I mean, I think it's really about aligning incentives and risk profiles and things like that. It's really just like a bunch of parameters, and it's like you have a layer of game theory on top of it, and we're just trying to optimize it to make the largest number of people happy, right? So it's a bit like that. Wouldn't you agree?
Totally. And I would add like product development into that, right? There's kind of a realistic roadmap to the utility that you're going to give your token, which is associated to the features of your application or your protocol. And it's not realistic to have all those features out at the beginning, because you'll be developing those features over time. So there's this need to kind of build your token system and your staking system in alignment with your roadmap, so that you can transition from one phase, from like the bootstrap phase to the early maturity phase to the real, a mature project phase. And each phase has kind of different needs, and being able to design for those needs, I believe, is important.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. Completely agree with that. Perfect. So, yeah, where can our listeners learn more about you? Like LinkedIn, YouTube, a personal website?
I do have a website, curiousrabbit.xyz. I've done nothing to it since I first launched this business. It's just been so busy. But you can, find some bare information there. You can find me on Twitter at curiousrabbit27. You can also find me on LinkedIn, curiousrabbit.eth.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you, Curious Rabbit. This was a very, very interesting conversation. And yeah, maybe we'll even host another session on token economics in the near future.
Cool. Yeah, I'd love to go more in depth about all of the complexities involved with building these systems. Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you, Stelios.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for being here with us, and make sure to go to the datascientist.com for more content on AI, Web3, and data science. Thank you.